Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Adventure Expo Spring 2021 with Midwest Mountaineering. Starting at 4 p.m., so in just like a minute here, we have Annie Nelson, who's going to be presenting on the Superior Hiking Trail and her through hiking experiences, and also getting out and hiking on the Superior Hiking Trail yourself. If you're logged on right now to the Outdoor Adventure Expo website watching this, you should definitely join the chat below the video screen. And that's a great spot for you to put your questions in that you have for Annie. And yeah, just ask anything that you want to know about the Superior Hiking Trail and her through hiking experience. And she'll be able to answer those at the end of her presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Annie now. And she's going to start.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Midwest Mountaineering's Spring Outdoor Expo. And today we're going to talk everything you need to know about planning a through hike on Minnesota's fabulous Superior Hiking Trail. I wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself. I always think it's nice when presenters provide a little context of their outdoor experience for you. So my name's Annie, and I am a two-time SHT through hiker. I'm also the author of a guide specifically for through hiking the Superior Hiking Trail. I've also completed a couple long distance trips, the last of which was a 5-month, 1,500-mile adventure on the North Country Trail. And I have about 10 years of Northwoods backpacking and canoeing wilderness experience. So what is through hiking? If you're new to the concept, through hiking is backpacking an entire trail in one. For the Superior Hiking Trail, I'm going to say it's in one trip. For some of the really long trails in the country, folks define it as backpacking an entire trail in one season or year, probably. But with the Superior Hiking Trail, most people can hike this trail successfully. Well, endurance athletes can do it in like 4 days and set speed records, but the average time is really 2 to 4 weeks. So I say through hiking is doing the whole thing in one hike. So why go do a through hike? Even 2 to 4 weeks, that's a substantial amount of time to take out of your life. For most of us, it's going to be all or even more than our paid leave from work. If we have paid leave, it's expensive. If you've got, family commitments and things like that, you're going to have to kind of rearrange your life to go do it. So why is it worth it? After 2,000 miles of long distance hiking, what I know is that it teaches you things about yourself, about the woods, and life on this planet that you really can't learn any other way. At about the 2-week mark on long distance trips, something happens that I call going fully feral, where you really adapt completely to living outside. It's like this ancient knowledge wakes up in your body. I think differently, I react differently. Even my body's stress system, my reactions to things functions differently. And it's really beautiful and amazing. It also profoundly connected me to the natural world and feeling like I really had an understanding of it and a deep relationship with it. So it's pretty awesome. It's very worth it. Brief introduction to the actual Superior Hiking Trail. What is it? Where is it? Well, it is a 300-mile trail that runs all the way from the Wisconsin border, just south of Duluth, Minnesota, up the gorgeous North Shore of Minnesota, all the way basically to the Canadian border. You can see the border. You can't quite touch it, but you're right up there. Along its length, there are 94 free campsites, established campsites that you share with other backpackers. This trail also in 2019 officially became part of the longest national scenic trail in America when it became officially part of the North Country Trail. So other national scenic trails that are very well known are like the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail, Ice Age Trail. So the SHT now forms 300 miles of the North Country Trail, which is 4,600 miles long. Okay, so what we're going to start with today is something I wish I'd known before I did my first through hike of the trail. We're just going to do a brief overview to kind of give you an idea of what to expect on the different sections of the trail. The trail in the main guide, which is produced by the Superior Hiking Trail Association, is basically broken down into 6 different sections of about 50 miles. So the first one is called the Duluth Section. And a lot of through hikers, there's kind of 2 ways to do a through hike on the Superior Hiking Trail. One is called a traditional through hike, which actually starts north of Duluth, and the other is called the complete through hike. To officially be considered in what they're calling an end-to-ender on the Superior Hiking Trail, you do need to complete the full 300 miles, but the community around the trail basically accepts both hikes. I always like to make the case to would-be through hikers, don't skip Duluth. The reason why people skip Duluth is because it's a bit more challenging logistically. There aren't free campsites for 52.7 miles because the trail is basically running through the city of Duluth, but there are a lot of camping and lodging options that you can pay for that are all very close to the trail. It is completely manageable and easy to hike the Duluth section, doing 10 miles a day, 15 miles a day, 20 miles a day. You've got lots of options. So, and the reason why you shouldn't skip it is because it's pretty magical. So this is Knowlton Creek. Duluth is the trail through the city is like this kind of magical secret forest corridor. I don't know how the SHTA did it. They did it partially because Duluth just has all these amazing parks that are they've kept them wild, even in the city. So you're hiking through the city, you can kind of hear cars, you can see houses, but you're still in this gorgeous north woods, those rocky river canyons. You get to do this really fun drop down. You do walk through the city, basically downtown, for about 8 miles. For part of this section. And that's probably the most challenging to find accommodations are, but there's a great hostel in Duluth now that serves hikers. There's hotels all over the place. And for that stretch, I always recommend don't bring food for that day, just eat your way from one end of the lake walk to the other, because there's all these amazing restaurants. So it can be a really fun day if you do it right. Once in a while in Duluth, you will pop out onto a little city street like this, but honestly, it's notable for how rare that is, because when you're hiking through the city, it's very quick. They always get you right back into the woods. North of Duluth is about a 50-mile stretch up to Two Harbors, where this is probably going to be the easiest stretch of trail as far as elevation gain. So along the length of the trail, I think this kind of changes sometimes, but the last estimate I saw, there's about 41,000 feet of elevation change. And that means going up and down. The Duluth section, there's a lot of climbing, way more climbing than you anticipate. Gorgeous views, a really fun scramble up Ely's Peak, stuff like that. Once you get north of Duluth, though, to Martin Road, which is where that traditional through hike would start, the trail kind of flattens out a little bit, and you start running through these kind of gorgeous young forests. There's a lot of beaver ponds, definitely beautiful rivers and creeks still, but it's a bit more gentle. So if I were planning a through hike, for example, this would be a section where I would recommend, if you want to try to do some bigger mile days, this would be a good time to try that out, either at the end or the beginning of your hike. Once you get, so there's this gorgeous, that's Fox Farm Pond, great campsite there. In these kind of quieter stretches, less vista sections of the trail, I just kind of love taking a look at the understory. There's tons of interesting stuff going on in the forest up there. Once you get to Two Harbors, you do start climbing more. Basically, the North Shore Highlands start, which is the same geological formation that it was formed when Lake Superior, Glacial Lake Superior was formed. It's what the Sawtooth Mountains, the famous Sawtooth Mountains that you will be hiking just a little bit further up the trail. So this is when the climbing starts a little bit more. Once you hit Castle Danger, yet you start getting these gorgeous rock knobs, these amazing views over, conifer forests. And this is on the left, that's a lookout in the encampment forest stretch. On the right, that's the gorgeous Silver Creek. Love that little creek. Then you route down Gooseberry River, where beavers are actually trying to dam the entire thing. I don't know if they'll be successful. Then you get up to Split Rock. One of the cool things that this trail does is it basically runs through every state park on the North Shore, except I think I guess, never mind. There's a national park up north farther, but anyway, so it's going through all of the state parks, which is nice as a through hiker because like every state park office has Wi-Fi. I'm not sure what they're doing with their indoor spaces right now with COVID, but honestly, like if it's a day where it's just raining, it's nice to go in and just take a break out of the rain for a while. You can charge your phone, stuff like that, check in with folks. But they're also, the state parks are gorgeous territories. So this loop up the Split Rock is one of the most popular on the trail because it's just got incredible views, great campsites. Once you get onto this stretch, this trail is a little bit famous for being muddy at times if we've had a lot of rain. The North Shore is a really, what I call, it's super active hydrologically because northern Minnesota, we just have a lot of rain. We have a lot of lakes. And of course, then you have Lake Superior, which is, people basically joke, well, it may be true. It basically generates its own weather. So that's one thing that you really want to be prepared for when you're hiking this trail is that it's going to be wet and it's going to be cold sometimes, even in the height of summer. When I thru hiked it the first time in August, there was a day when it was like 50 degrees, like 15-mile-an-hour winds. My rain shell didn't work. It was a miserable day. I just got in my tent. So even in the height of summer, because of how far north it is, you can have really, really cold days. So when I see people ask questions like, can I hike this trail with a sleeping bag liner? Not this one. I wouldn't recommend it. So it's going to be wet. It's going to be cold. It's going to be muddy sometimes, but it's always gorgeous. And once you get to Silver Bay, this is, you get into Tetagooch State Park. Super popular stretch for very good reasons. You get phenomenal views. And this whole trail was designed as a ridgeline trail. That's why it's called, the newsletter for the association is called the Ridgeline. When they were building it, they did intentionally build it so that it just has incredible views. And every time I hike it, the thing that just comes into my head is that this trail is a work of art. Very few trails I've hiked in the Midwest offer just the sheer density of gorgeous views as this trail, which is why it's very popular. And this is one of the most popular stretches. This is the famous Bear Lake Overlook. It's going to be a crowded section of trail. There's a campsite down this lake. And if you're through hiking, you are going to just get so much beauty along the entire stretch of the trail. You're going to get so many cool campsites. I honestly wouldn't really recommend you even try camping here anymore. It's so overcrowded that people are kind of creating illegal campsites around it now and causing a lot of destruction. And it's just super crowded. So if you really, really have your heart set on camping there, and especially if it's like a weekend, my advice is try to get there by 11 a.m. because you might not get a campsite otherwise. After you get through Tetagooch, you get into some more of the Sawtooths, I think, or you're starting to get into the Sawtooths. On the left here is section 13, this gorgeous overlook, big climb up there. There's a cool campsite up there too that people really like. On the right, you have the Sawmill Creek Boardwalk. I believe that they just rebuilt this. This had been kind of falling down a little bit, but it's my favorite boardwalk on the whole trail. It's so long. I think it's like half a mile long or something, quarter mile. And you can just see the kind of impact that beavers have in the North Woods, which is big. Those guys are probably only second to humans, maybe termites, for engineering skills. After you get past section 13, you hop onto this nice, another kind of flatter stretch between section 13 and George Crosby Manitou. There's this really gorgeous, less elevation change. We're kind of running through lake territory. You get Eggy Lake and Sanju Lake. There's some gorgeous sites there, and the hiking is a bit more mild. Lesnar Creek, some really gorgeous campsites here. Crosby Manitou is Minnesota's very first backpacking state park. They have fee campsites in there. You can camp at those. You do need to do a reservation before you get there. There's no cell service in this park. So it's good to do it maybe like at your rest day ahead of going onto the stretch if you want to camp there. Otherwise, there's sites before it and right after it. But it has one of the most intense climbs, I think, on the trail, especially if you're going northbound. Climbing up out of the Manitou River Gorge is really, it's a tough climb. It's super gorgeous though, and this is an outlook at the top of that. After Crosby Manitou starts, you get into what I call the peaks and the valleys. So you start getting this amazing river Cascade Valleys. This is Caribou River. There's a great multi-group site there. That's the Temperance River on the left. And the Sawtooth Mountains officially start at Carlson Peak, which it looks really intimidating when you're climbing up to it, but it's actually a really gorgeous climb, really fun climb. And you can go all the way up on top of Carlson Peak. There's a little spur trail up there. I always try to take a break or lunch there. Just amazing views if it's clear. Yeah, so on the left, that's the view from Carlson Peak when it's not clear out. And then on the right is like my favorite river gorge of the whole trail. This is the Poplar River near Lutsen. And I think this is the view from Laveau Mountain. One piece of advice I can give you, if you have the time, there are just amazing loop spur trails going off all over the place, basically all along the trail. And these I think are kind of to give day hikers a good option to kind of do out and backs. But for through hikers, they are a great way to kind of get off the beaten path a little bit, like especially if you're hiking on a day when it's really crowded. This is a great way to kind of get away and just find even more gorgeous views, a good place to go take a little break or something like that if you have the time to do it. I have honestly never really hiked a spur trail on the SHT that I didn't love, so I may not be remembering the ones I didn't like, but especially in the Sawtooth, all those ones are on the peaks are worth the extra time if you have it. This is just an example of frequently what the woods are going to look like when you wake up in the morning. You get a nice gorgeous fog. I always feel like a unicorn could step out of the trees at any moment. Very magical feeling. Once you get into Grand Marais, the stretch to the northern terminus is the most remote. It is gorgeous. People always ask me what my favorite stretch of the trail is, and it's just like it's impossible to pick, really. The whole trail is cool. I mean, I love the whole thing. I love Duluth. I really love the stretch from Duluth the Two Harbors, which people don't seem to like much, but I love it. But this stretch north of Grand Marais probably is my favorite. You get you're still going to get some great vistas. This is Pincushion Mountain on the left. On the right, you got the famous Lake Walk. There's a southern lake walk that's running through Canal Park and through the city of Duluth. There's a northern lake walk, which is about 1.5 miles long. It's the only time that you're actually hiking down on the lake, and you hike through that cobble. It can be tough, and people kind of love this or they hate it. So again, not a bad idea to just plan to take a break in the middle of that in case you find yourself hating it. And it's just, it's really one of the only times you're going to be right on the lake, so you might as well spend some quality time with it, especially if it's a beautiful day. I call this 5 Mile Rock Meadow. I don't think it actually has a name, but it is probably my favorite spot on the entire trail. It's north coming out of Grand Marais. I don't know, this picture you probably can't see it very well, but way off in the distance there right here, there's a little rock. And I think that's called 5 Mile Rock because for boats, it's basically like a 5 mile mark to Grand Marais. And there's just this long, sweeping, gorgeous meadow. And in the fall, the sumacs turn red, and you've got the asters with their purple, and the goldenrod is yellow. It's incredible. Then you get into some major beaver territory. Carlson Pond. There's a ton of them up here. And that's important depending on the time of year that you're hiking. So both Duluth the Two Harbors and probably this stretch, like once you get north of that 5 Mile Rock, all the way up to basically Hellacious Overlook. I think it's about a 20-mile stretch. You're really in beaver territory. And in late to June, July, and early August, that means very ferocious bugs. But otherwise, the gorgeous thing about the SHT is that the bugs can be intense. But you're going to get breaks from them, especially up on those high vista points where you're getting a good wind kind of blowing them off you. And so you will have moments of peace from them, even during bug season, but it's good to be prepared. This is Hellacious Overlook. This is one of the last high points. I think this might be the last high point before the Terminus. Just a gorgeous view. I think they say you can say on clear days, you can see Isle Royale all the way from this point. This is an unabashed celeb drop of my last through hike. I actually got to meet Shug. If people know Shug, he's a very, very popular YouTube backpacker here in Minnesota. I'm a huge fan of his. He's helped me, buy the correct gear, learn about trails here in Minnesota that I love. And so I was just thrilled to get to meet him. And, hey, if you're out there at the right time, you might get to meet him too. Okay, so that's kind of the overview. Basically, the Duluth section, challenging because there's no free campsites, but totally doable. Lots of elevation change. So it's physically tough, but really easy resupply because you're going through town, obviously. Duluth the Two Harbors, pretty physically easy hiking, challenging for resupply. There's not really towns around, and it's a 6-mile walk into Two Harbors. So a lot of people just keep going, like they resupply in Duluth and they just keep going up the trail. Two Harbors to Silver Bay gets a little bit more challenging climbing. Silver Bay, basically all the way up to Grand Marais. You're going to be working hard every day, climbing hard every day. Resupply between Silver Bay and Grand Marais is very easy. There's tons of trail towns, tons of post offices. You got lots of options, all within basically a couple miles of the trail, so nothing too hard to get to. From Grand Marais to the Terminus, of course, there's Hovland and the hippie hostel to resupply, and the climbing is going to be harder than you think. I don't know why I always think the north is going to be flatter, but it's really not. You still do a lot of climbing. The highest point on the trail is on that last stretch, Rosebush Ridge. And then of course the Terminus is super remote. I mean, it's really up there, there's no towns. Very rarely do people have cell service. So that's probably the most, I guess I would say, dangerous part of the trail. So let's talk about dangers. Let's talk about challenges. What should you be aware of before you go hike this trail? Thankfully, in Minnesota, we don't have poisonous snakes. We don't have scorpions and stuff like that. You really generally aren't going to have to worry too much about water. It's everywhere on the trail. What's the challenges for this trail are just tons of uneven terrain. It can be very hard on your feet and hips and knees. Really easy to take a tumble. When you look at Knoll's wilderness medicine data about the kind of physical risks that we face out backpacking, I think people, especially people just kind of starting to get into backpacking or maybe considering their first through hiking, understandably, we're very worried about those animals with big teeth and claws. But, we need to be aware out there. We need to be safe if we have interactions with them. But really and truly, the things that are the main reasons people get forced off the trail is through when you're hiking through a terrain like this and you twist an ankle and sprain it. They're called athletic injuries. It's hiking over this, it's really easy to get blisters. They get excruciating fast. So that can be a challenge. Another challenge you can face sometimes is having to ford rivers. This is a Split Rock River. There will not be a bridge here ever again. Basically, the Trail Association tried for years. They built 4 bridges, 4 of them washed out. I think that's right, at least 4. And what they've discovered is basically in the springtime when all of the snow melts, the rivers get so swollen that it's really hard to keep the bridges on them because they just get washed out. And they did it for years. They studied to try to build a bridge that would stay through that kind of raging torrent. And it just proved to be, it was going to be really, really expensive to do. So ultimately they decided that it maybe wasn't the best use of funds. So you're going to have to ford it. And generally it's really fine unless, that early spring melt. And then if there's been a huge rain, like a real downpour the night before you're going to cross it, those are the times when it might be a little bit too dangerous to cross. And there are really good resources out there, YouTube videos and whatnot, to kind of learn about how you safely cross or judge when water is not safe to cross. I've never had an issue getting across this thing. And a lot of people just hop across those rocks. I am a very short person and I don't trust my vertical. So I just always walk it. Rain, 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 rain. It will rain on you. It will rain on you a lot. It's going to rain on you multiple times a day sometimes. Sometimes it's going to be pouring on you right as you're setting up or taking down your tent, and there's just going to be nothing you can do, and it's going to get flooded. Okay. And this really freaked me out when I was first starting out with long distance backpacking. And what you learn is you deal with it. You figure it out. So if it's warm summer and the rain stops at some point during the day, it's a great time to get up on one of those rock balds, take a break, take all your wet gear out of your bag, stretch it out in the sunshine, and let it dry out. It's amazing what a nice gentle breeze and some strong sunshine will do with wet gear. It dries very quickly. Hiking in the rain has become one of my favorite things to do now that I have learned how to do it well. So it actually, this is one of the just magical parts of through hiking is all of these things that we worry about before we go. As you learn to deal with them out there, you just start to feel so comfortable in so many different conditions and you feel so empowered. It just starts to feel like home. The trail is also famous for its roots. So again, this is just something that kind of can trip you up. Once in a while, you're just going to have to look down while you're hiking, maybe all the time. As I mentioned before, the mud can get intense. Usually it's really not a danger unless this was actually in the Cascade River Valley. And that river valley really has some steep up and downs on clay. So if it's rained hard, okay, last time I did it, actually this day, I basically like slid 20 feet down the hill. I didn't make it, so it was because it can be really slick, but that's kind of the worst case scenario. Normally it's just, your feet are going to be muddy. The bugs can absolutely be a big challenge. I think they are a big challenge psychologically. They are also a challenge just physically because of the health risks that they can present. Of course, we all know about ticks, and ticks do carry pretty dangerous diseases, Lyme disease, Powassan, I forget how, babiosis, stuff like that. And, I think the best advice I can give you for bug protection is just to do what works for you. What works for me is, I'll be honest, I love hiking in like the height of bug season. Black flies do not scare me. Mosquitoes, bring it on. And the reason why I love hiking in bug season is because the forest is gorgeous. Okay. I'm talking wildflowers that you cannot see any other time of year, just horizon to horizon. All of the berries, the thimbleberries, the blueberries, the raspberries, it's warm enough to go swimming. It's just gorgeous in the forest in July. And so the system that works best for me with bugs is I just use netting. I don't use any kind of pesticides because I've learned, for whatever reason, they don't work for me. If I'm really, really, really in a horde of mosquitoes, 100% DEET doesn't matter. They basically have the numbers on you. They're going to bite you. So what I find is better is just to wear netting, and I have a full suit. I have a head net, I have a shirt of netting, and I even have pants of netting. And that can be a little warm, but to me, it's actually a much more successful bug strategy than bug juice has ever worked for me. So it helps keep me sane, because that's the other thing that can really happen is that if the bugs get overwhelming, it can really tank your mental game out there. And I've definitely had days on long hikes when I was just like, no, I'm done. I can't like literally cannot be eaten by mosquitoes for another second. But I always got up and kept going because it was worth it to me. And part of dealing with those challenges, I think, is to set yourself up for success is to kind of shift thinking, especially if this is really going to be your first long distance experience or first through hiking experience in the woods. If you have mostly a background of kind of like camping being vacation time, is to understand that through hiking isn't a vacation, it's an experience. Like through hiking, it will have insanely gorgeous moments. You will have just times when you were having so much fun, you will feel like the luckiest person alive. Through hiking also involves pain, discomfort, and really tough mental days when all you want to do is quit, but you just can't, because you want to do this goal. So you just like your only option to solve your problem is to keep hiking. And that can be you're going to have some tough days out there, but it's so worth it. So shifting that expectation, it's not a vacation, it's an experience, right? One question that people like to ask a lot is, what is the best time to through hike? I think it kind of really depends on a few different things. I think it depends on you and kind of your body. For example, I don't deal very well with heat, so I'm actually really comfortable hiking early in the year and also pretty late in the year. If you want to avoid the bugs, of course, that's what people usually say the best time to hike it is September, October. The trail is very crowded because of that, though. So if you're looking for a more solitary experience, a more solitude, it's probably good to go a little bit earlier in the season. Although even with the trail gaining popularity, I think you're definitely going to have days where it's very quiet out there, especially midweek. You will have alone time with the trail. But if you go on your hike September, October, expect to share campsites, expect the campsites to be crowded and stuff like that. And then the other kind of just honest thing I have to share is that it's really hard to tell people what the best time to through hike is, because the weather is really different every year. It changes all the time. Sometimes we can have, like this year, we're having a really early, gorgeous spring up here. Sometimes it's like winter will not release its stranglehold until almost like June. It's just still cold and kind of gray and ugly out. Sometimes, it feels like summer all the way through October. The last time I through hiked the trail in September, it was already snowing up at the north end. So it really varies year to year. So I can't tell you when going is going to be the perfect time for you to go, but it's always going to be an adventure. So now let's shift into talking really about planning. And of course, the first thing to do is just get your hands on, especially this main guide to the Spear Hiking Trail. This is the entire trail, broken down, everything you need to know about every single section, distances between campsites, trailheads, information about shuttles and stuff like that. The next one you definitely need are the maps. They have a trail atlas that's available both as printed maps and as GPS on an app called Avenza. A new resource they put together, this is a popular thing to do in a lot of trails, it's called a data book. And it basically is just the numbers. So it just tells you campsite name, how far is it from the other, the other two campsites, north and south, how many tent pads, is there water, just the real basics. The one in the middle is my guide, the Thru-Hike the Superior Hiking Trail. This is going to help people who really are curious about, like, how do I just even make this work, the logistics? What do I need to know? A lot of what I'm mentioning in this presentation is in this book. There's specific itineraries for how to get through that Duluth section with specific places to stay, how much they cost, their contact information. That guide basically includes an entire yellow pages for the trail, all of the businesses and the outfitters along the 300-mile length who are going to have gear that you want, hiker food, which accept resupply boxes, who the shuttles are, their contact information, all of that stuff. And then, yeah, so I think planning for thru-hike, of course, I'm going to recommend my guide, but I think you should, what I like to do is to get the digital version of the Superior Hiking Trail Guide, keep that on. I use a Kindle app on my smartphone. My book is available as a digital book as well. So I load any books that I can into my cell phone as a digital to cut down on weight. The data book's not available digitally yet, but it only weighs 3 ounces. So I'd bring that with me tucked in my pack for quick reference stuff. And then I actually do believe in carrying both printed and digital maps, just in case my phone dies. But the Superior Hiking Trail is incredibly well maintained, very well marked, and very easy to follow. And honestly, the only time I've gotten lost is when I was going through Chattagooch State Park and I just wasn't paying attention. And I took a state park trail instead of the SHT. So the next resource for planning a trail that I recommend is the trail's website, superiorhiking.org. They've got tons of information on there. That's great. They, of course, also are the best source of information of any kind of issues with the trail. Trails are not static, fixed things. They are like a living, breathing creature, and all of the animals that make their home around the trail are constantly impacting it. Weather is constantly impacting it. It passes through more than 80 parcels of private land. Sometimes changes need to happen related to that to maintain good relationships with private landowners. So like in November, large stretches of the trail actually closed down because private landowners are hunting. Things like that. So all of that stuff you need to know is on the SHTA website. How do you actually figure out how long it's going to take you to do this? Well, you need to know your average hiking speed with a fully loaded pack. So that's one piece of advice I always give, is try to do a shakedown hike if you can. So get all your gear, load it into your pack, try to go out for a couple days. Even if you live close to the trail, go ahead and go out onto the trail. Nothing's going to give you a better idea of how fast you're going to move on the SHT than doing a test hike on the SHT itself. But once you know your hiking speed, you just take that by the average amount of hours you want to hike per day. And this is another thing. So time of year, if you really want to be hiking in daylight, you can hike longer. If you're going out in midsummer, we get like 13 hours of daylight up here. In the fall, it's going to be closer to like 12, I think. Or anyway, you start losing the light basically in September. So your average speed, how many hours you want to hike a day, and then how many rest days you want to take. I love rest days and highly recommend them. I take one every 6 days about, if I can, if I have an option to do so. I think they're important for a couple things. I mean, it gives you a guaranteed time. You can get your gear dried out if you need to. I just always combine my rest days with my resupply days too. Although I really also think taking rest days on the trail itself is pretty cool. It should be done in group sites if you can, because they ask you not to camp more than one night at the small sites, especially. But there's a lot of big group sites along the trail you could do this at that would pair well with a resupply. And so if you take your hiking speed, the hours you want to hike a day, and how many rest days you want to do, and basically divide 300 miles by that gets you how many days you want to do. If you're going to do 10 miles a day, it's basically like 30 days. If you're going to do 15, I think it's like 26, something like that, 25. So about 2 to 4 weeks. How do you actually plan? You can do it like this. This is what I did for my first thru-hike. I actually went through, picked my exact mileage, found the campsite I wanted to get to for that day, made any notes that I thought I needed to know, like if there wasn't water at the campsite or something like that. I was prepared, man. I did tons of research. And the second I hit the trail, nothing went as planned. You can see this is me, like this is the 9th version of that plan, because what happens when you get out on trail is, some days you go faster than you think you were going to go. Some days you go slower. Some days you get an injury. Some days the weather is just crazy and you got to get in your tent because it's 50 degrees, right? And you can't, I couldn't handle it. So you just start adjusting your plan almost immediately. So I think what I like to recommend is that you do great research, get all the maps, get the guides, sketch your plan, but then accept that it's going to change when you're out there, and that's totally okay. I shoot for an average for my week, so that if I have to hike short one day, I know I can hike a little bit longer a couple days after that to make it up if I need to. One thing I love for thru-hikers specifically, the main SHT guide is written for the full spectrum of hiker, from day hiker to thru-hiker. So what that means is there's a lot of math that it makes you do to subtract the spurs on and off, because a lot of the trailheads have spurs coming on. So the way the book is currently written is the sections, the mileage for the sections is actually not accurate for you as a thru-hiker, because it's including the lengths of trail to get on and off that section. So it basically, what you end up doing is just figuring it out by campsite to campsite, but those are spread out throughout the book. So the SHTA and I put into my guide basically a guide that's just the list of campsites and how far the distance is between them. So I really, I think either one is great. I really love the data book. I think it's a great resource. So, but what this does is, like, basically sometimes you get to where you plan to camp and you're still feeling good. You still want to keep hiking. You got time left in the day. So then you can just look at this quick list and say, oh, okay, it's only 2.8 miles to the next campsite. I'm going to keep going. Or, oh no, it's 11 miles to the next site. I'm going to set up camp. Let's have a fire. Okay. One thing to know about the sites on the SHT is it's not first come, first serve. It's there's multiple tent pads there. Because of how backpacking works, everybody's hiking. You don't know how many miles people have done that day. You don't know what kind of physical condition they're in. They might be in a ton of pain. They might need desperately to stop backpacking. That's why we share. So we share sites on the SHT. I think, within reason. Basically, if it's super crowded and you just cannot see another place to put another hammock or a tent. Thankfully on this spear hiking trail, it's rarely more than a couple miles to the next site. That's one thing you should be prepared for on the site, that once in a while, or this trail, you might have to keep hiking when you really are exhausted and just want to stop. It's just kind of part of it. You're going to dig down, you're going to keep going, you will make it happen, and be super impressed by how you were able to kind of push through successfully if what you thought was your physical limit. It's one of the coolest parts of it, honestly. But most of the time people are just like, yeah, come on in, and they make space for you, and it's kind of a party, and it's really fun. I already talked about don't skip Duluth, so we'll go past that. Resupplying, I recommend carrying about no more than 5 to 6 days of food, and how frequently you need to resupply along the trail is again going to be guided by how quickly you're hiking, how fast you're doing the trail. So if you're doing 30 days, you're probably going to have to resupply 5 times. If you're hiking, 20 miles a day, you can probably actually get away with even like 1 resupply, because you're going to start out with your food at the beginning, resupply halfway down the trail, and then you're going to end in Duluth and just eat whatever you want. One feature of my book that I want to promote is it is extremely helpful in planning this part of your trip. I put together an entire guide up and down the trail of all of your different resupply options, so you can really match it to what you think your speed's going to be. And it's really super in depth with all of the resources that are going to be at each of that site. Not all of them are equal. Not all of them have a laundromat. Not all of them have a place to stay. Not all of them have a grocery store. So it's important to know when you're going to resupply, what's going to be there in town. I think general guidance are really, again, it just kind of depends on how you eat and what your dietary needs are. But generally, people say carry anywhere between 1 to 2 pounds of food per day, and you want to shoot for between 2,500 and 4,000 calories. I would not recommend treating a through hike as a diet. It is insane how many calories that you build. You're still running a calorie deficit most days with 4,000 calories. And what starts to happen is your body, if you're not keeping up on your food, your body just doesn't have the energy to hike, and it can get miserable really fast. What I always say is food is my mood on the trail. So I am one of those terrible people. I always bring too much, because I've run out before, and it's like, you just feel like that old Energizer Bunny commercial where you're winding down. You're just like, I cannot hike anymore because you don't have any gas. This is some examples of stuff I eat out on trails. Oh, good old Spam. Can always fancy it up with barbecue sauce and relish or something like that. Of course, there's foraging you can do. I drink a lot of coffee out there. I want to go back though and talk about electrolytes, especially if you're hiking in the heat. These are super, super, super duper important. And also food with fat and salt. So the kind of, the healthy diet that we tend to eat when we're working like a desk job and not getting tons of exercise is actually going to be the opposite of the way that you want to eat on the trail. A lot of hikers will actually even add in extra fat to their meals. I don't know if this is as necessary for a 3-week hike as compared to people who are like hiking the Appalachian Trail, which is, you've seen the pictures of people at the end of that trail. You lose so much weight. I lost 30 pounds on my 5-mile hike, but 10 pounds of that was just from hiking the Superior Hiking Trail, because it's a super physical trail. So, so you really, especially in the heat, you need salt. You really need electrolytes. You need fat. Fat is actually, you use it for fuel when you're doing this kind of endurance sport, basically. Oh, and this is going to be your view for dinner and breakfast and probably lunch. Can't beat it. Already talked about, this is just a screen grab from my guide. This is kind of an example of the detail it gives on each resupply location, what's there, whatnot. I did say before that I think finding your way on the SHT is very easy to do generally. However, the North Shore has pretty fantastic storms on a regular basis. And what can happen in those storms is it basically brings down huge like swaths of forest, and it just obliterates stretches of the trail. So I do think it's a good thing to have good, strong compass skills. There's a lot of ways to acquire these. If you're here in Minnesota, I'm not sure if they're doing meets right now, but there's a orienteering club where you can go out and learn how to take a bearing and really navigate using topography and the lay of the land and all that stuff. Because if you ever did kind of get lost off trail, being able to navigate your way back to it, or even to a road, or even into town, could make the difference between you being able to essentially self-rescue or having to get rescued. Having to get rescued, things happen. We get sick out there. Just, not even anything that you do. We're just humans. Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes you're going to need help. One thing, I hike solo a lot. One thing I bring with me in this upper left corner is something called an Inreached Alarm. It's a satellite communicator. So it's basically, it allows me to communicate with emergency services if I don't have cell service, but it's not infallible. You do need clear sky. If you're in heavy trees or heavy cloud cover, sometimes it takes 20 minutes for messages to go back and forth. So if I'm really, really fatally, like if I'm gravely injured, it may not be enough to make the difference, right? So we do take risks out there. And I think that's something my book really details, kind of like all the different risks. And I think that's an individual decision. We all have to decide our level of comfort and what risks we're willing to take. I don't think it's as dangerous as a lot of people think it is. I think life is dangerous. and it's important though to be aware of like what the real risks out there. And I mentioned knolls before, and it's like the real causes of death out in the backwoods. It's not bears, it's falling and drowning. So like when I'm solo hiking, I don't go right up to the edge of the cliff and look over. I just don't do it, because to me it's not worth, potentially just a horribly timed trip right at the edge, and then I'm gone. So leave no trace. Yes, please don't trash the trail. Please don't do it. It's becoming more and more of an issue. There's a lot of people out there, and some of them leave their trash behind, like this person who brought in an egg crate, sleeping pad, I assume, to sleep on, and then decided that they didn't need to haul it out because it was annoying. Everything that you leave behind, somebody else has to deal with. There are no maids. There's no turn down service. If you leave your trash, like literally a volunteer is going to have to come pick it up. So this is, people talk about trail angels and this kind of magical thing of people just like doing favors for you while you're going through this super rigorous thing. And my point to through hikers is this is how you be a trail angel to other hikers. Pack it in, pack it out. Use the latrine, they were awesome. If you don't have a latrine, please dig a cat hole. Try to get it far off the trail and 200 feet away from all water sources, please. Private land, there's a ton of private land on the Spear Hiking Trail. Like I said before, more than 80 private landowners allow this trail to cross. And why is that? Well, the Spear Hiking Trail runs through one of the most popular areas in Minnesota. If you're from out of state, this is probably our #1 tourist destination in the entire state, is this North Shore, because it is that gorgeous. So running a trail through this area, there just is not a 300-mile stretch of public land that we can do whatever we want on. This trail exists because private landowners give us permission to do it. And that's why it's really important for us to respect. Anytime we see a sign on the trail that says, please don't get off the trail, no camping here, no fires, stuff like that. Because if we don't, we can lose it. And it's happened before. This is called the Gooseberry Gap. We lost this, I think, in 2014 because people were illegally camping and building illegal fires, and then actually even got into a verbal altercation with the actual landowner himself as he was out hunting on his own land. And he had enough and said, you know what, nope, no more trail. And we are still trying to rebuild this section. So that's I think people think like, oh, whatever, we'll just go build another. No, it's really hard. It's really tough up there because there's not, again, it's not like there's just public land everywhere that we can just build on really quick. You have to go out and convince a bunch of new private landowners to allow you to run the trail on their property, and that we're going to be respectful of what they ask us to do. So this trail is different than others. Some trails you are asked to what's called dispersed camp or stealth camp. You're just out setting up your tent wherever you want in the forest. It's really important on this trail that we do not do that. It is just a different type of trail. That's why there are 94 free campsites, so we don't have to do that. People ask me a lot of questions about gear and what's called base weight. So base weight is basically everything in your pack except fuel, water, and food. So definitely on the left, that was like my first week trip on the trail, and my pack was ridiculous. And I was also carrying all sorts of stuff for my dog, and it was super heavy. I still had a great time. It was awesome, but I did work very hard to get my pack weight down after that, especially for something like a through hike where you're going to be out there for a long time. I think lowering your pack weight is worth the financial investment if you can do it, because I do think it helps cut down on those athletic injuries, just how brutal it feels off the bat. And yeah, but it's also not going to, you can still do a through hike with a 45-pound pack and be totally happy. So Through hiking in the time of coronavirus, some things to be aware of. Things are starting to change here in Minnesota now. Last summer, basically nothing was open. You couldn't dine in anywhere. That's starting to change, which is huge for through hikers. A lot of restaurants are now open. You can actually eat there. I think so. It is starting to open up a little bit more, but there's still a lot of requirements. You do still need masks to enter businesses. All the shuttle drivers on the SHT, I think, require you to wear a mask. There's 4 different shuttles that serve the trail, and then of course just people giving rides and taxis and stuff like that. Lutsen is not accepting resupply boxes at the Lutsen Resort, which they normally do. Oh, I'm sorry, Spirit Mountain is not closed anymore. That's out of date. They're going to open this season, thankfully. That makes hiking the Duluth stretch a lot easier. So that's done. But there still potentially might be less access to those indoor spaces I was talking about, like, places you kind of want to retreat into on a bad weather day or charge your devices. So I would just be kind of prepared for that. And then there's also reduced hours of operation. Grand Marais is this beautiful, lovely, it's my favorite trail town on the whole trail, way up north. It's the last real big trail town before you hit the terminus on the northern end. They have reduced hours of operation because of COVID, but also because they're having a labor shortage up there right now. So they just can't be open. So, and then one thing to just be aware of is that north of Duluth, there's more limited medical care. So if you get sick, I think you're going to have to, it might be kind of tricky to navigate that. And I don't actually think too much lodging is closed anymore. Sorry, this was outdated from last year. So most of the places that you're going to want to stay in town are open and happy to have you. But I think that it's important if you're going to through hike this summer, even things are getting better. Lots of people are getting vaccinated, but we are not out of the woods yet with this thing. You definitely are going to want to double check any business that you really need to make your through hike happen. Like, if you're going to go, I think all the post offices have normal hours, but if you're trying to like run into a store on a Sunday night, you probably want to double check the hours of operation because things are also changing constantly. I've been trying to keep track of all the COVID changes up on the shore, and it's like almost impossible because people are really trying to open up, but it's just, who knows what's ever going to happen at any given time with this thing. And then a little bit of probably unpopular talk and tough talk, but I'm going to risk it because I think that it's an important thing to really think about. I think if you're going to through hike right now, you need to have a COVID plan. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you get sick, if you get COVID on the trail, what are you going to do? How are you going to get yourself off the trail without risking exposing everybody who would be helping you? And some things to consider are that I've done more than 2,000 miles of long distance backpacking, solo backpacking by myself. I've gotten sick 3 times that required me to get off trail. When it happens, it is really alarming. No matter how much you mentally prepare for it, it just freaks you out. Okay. You go from being capable of hiking 20 miles into town, no problem. But once you get sick, you physically cannot hike like you were hiking. So even if there's a town within 15 miles of you, can you physically get yourself there? That's a legitimate thing. Even maybe not COVID, but just kind of any illness can really impact your ability to actually hike. Okay. So, and if you find that yourself in that situation, which I have 3 times where I realized I cannot actually hike, I can't hike my way off this trail. It's a really, really alarming psychologically situation. And your first impulse is you're just desperate to be off trail in a safe indoor, hopefully your own home. Okay. Because you're not feeling good. Of course, you're sick. Sometimes you don't know what's going on, and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of psychological pressure from you. This like homing instinct kicks in that could maybe, like I would be worried that it would influence me to make kind of decisions that were not good for the people around me in order for me to feel better. That would be my fear. So I think it's important to have a real plan. If you're coming in from out of state to through hike the trail, COVID has, according to the CDC, a 2 to 14 day incubation period. What does that mean? If you pick it up on your way to the trail, you might be halfway down the trail before you get sick. And if you're from out of state, what are you going to do? Are you going to, does it mean saving up extra money so you could afford to quarantine in a hotel for 10 days, which I think is the current requirement? I mean, there's a lot of questions here, and this is why it's like, I think you need to have a COVID plan. As a local person, my plan would probably be try to get somebody to come with me on my through hike. And about 3 days before I leave, I go get tested. I am vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, that's great, but we can still get it. And there's a lot of questions about how contagious we are. So I would get myself tested 3 days before I left, and I would try to isolate before I left. And if the test is negative, awesome, ready to rock. I'd try to hike with a partner probably. Normally I like solo, but going with a partner is probably going to be the easiest way to do transportation. If you're really concerned about that, you just leave a car at either end. Otherwise, the reality is that you're going to have to deal with mass transportation at some point, either in a shuttle or taking a bus or taking a plane. And, you might pick it up on your way to the trail. And so having a plan that's going to keep you and others safe for getting yourself off, I think is really important right now. And as a local person, I would probably ask somebody who is maybe fully vaccinated to be kind of my emergency backup for that, who might be willing to come drive up to the trail and get me off. So that would probably be my go-to plan for that. Yeah. So, but sorry, we can stop that part and just switch back to it's magical. So I love this quote from Acuna. He's the first African-American Triple Crown hiker. And he says, when you're on trail and you're stopping for a second or you're moving slowly, you can feel everything else moving around you. You can feel it through the trail. If you want to know more about me or more about my guide, this is my website. You can go find more information there. Otherwise, let's open it up for questions.
Thanks, Annie. I'm just going to give people a moment here since there's a little bit of a lag between when you're talking and when they finish the presentation, about 20 seconds, so they have a chance to type in a couple more questions.
Sure.
All right. So the first question we have is, what do you do when campsites are full, and is it okay to set up elsewhere? You touched on this a little bit, but maybe just a little more clarification.
Sure. When I get to camp and it's full, I usually just kind of go in and take the mood. Like if I'm really exhausted and I really want to camp there and I don't care that it's full, I'll just kind of go in and be like, can I squeeze in? And the guidance from Jo Swanson, who's the trail development director, what she's told me is that even if all of the tent pads in the site are taken, it is okay to go into the campsite and kind of fit yourself in somewhere, as long as you can see the fire grate from your tent or your hammock. Every campsite has a fire grate. It is not okay to hike, quarter mile down the trail where there's not a campsite and throw your tent up or your hammock up in the woods, because of what I mentioned before about the private land ownership. The trail is like, you would have to have like plat maps to really understand when you're on and off private land. So just to be respectful of the landowners and the SHTA who asked this of us, it's really important to camp in campsites. If I go into the camp and there's really not a place for me to fit, then I just keep going. You have to keep going then. So it's pretty rare that it happens. I did hear last year was a huge through hiking year. I think actually the pandemic was the outdoors was like this amazing thing we could all still do. And so a lot of people were through hiking. And because of that, like Hazel campsite up at the northern part, it's kind of a good rhythm when you're going southbound to hit Hazel distance wise. And so like, and it's a tiny site. It's really teeny tiny. It's got like, I don't even know, 2, 3 tent pads. Maybe it's really got 2 tent pads and like a hammock spot. And apparently there would be like 18 people camped out there. I can't imagine camping there with 18 people. But you know, you kind of find a way. So.
Awesome. Thanks for that clarification, Annie. The next question is asking, is a hammock worth the wait?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't answer this for you because I'm a ground dweller. I know hammock campers, they swear by them, but I've always preferred a tent myself.
Have you hiked northbound or southbound or both on the SHG?
I've only done northbound so far. I really want to do southbound. I think, oh, I definitely should have addressed this. Great question. So people ask that a lot. Which way do I go? And I definitely think time of year is a good place to start with that question. If you want to go do like a late fall hike, I really think it's probably better to go southbound, or at least it would be for me, because the farther north you get, the cold, like you're basically walking into winter. Whereas if you're going southbound, you're actually going to hopefully be catching the wave of fall going south, because fall starts first up north and then goes south. So people have concerns about hiking northbound because of generally the lack of service up at the northern terminus. So the question is, how do I get myself off of there? It's way remote. It's way up there. There are 4 different shuttle services that are serving the trail this year. So you can always, book yourself a shuttle and just try to make that day. But I don't like hiking to a deadline myself. Things happen, and I just don't want to be feeling like I'm stressed the whole time trying to like, oh, I got to get to the terminus by, 12 days from now. Some people like that. It's like a motivating thing. So, but I don't like it. So the other thing I always tell people who are like concerned about going northbound and that, how do I get picked up, is maybe just wait to book your shuttle until you get to Grand Marais. By that point, you'll have hiked 250 miles. You will definitely know your hiking speed. You will know how you're feeling. You're going to be in the best shape of your hike. And barring any major injury between Grand Marais and the northern terminus, you're going to be able to predict very accurately when you will be there. Or you could always flip flop. You could, when you get to Grand Marais, you could catch a shuttle up to the terminus and hike back to Grand Marais.
You kind of answered this in that last answer, but the next question is strategy for pickup at the northern terminus.
Yeah. I'm a real big fan about hiking back to your car, whether you're doing day hike, section hike, or through hike. So honestly, my favorite way to deal with it is I just do the shuttle at the beginning.
Someone's asking, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Someone's asking, I heard the campsite before the northern terminus is in a swamp. Can you describe it?
Oh, Andy Creek? I don't know if it's again, it depends on how much rain there's been. Andy Creek is challenging. Like I would say, if you're a hammock camper, it's going to be real hard to camp there. And it's really hard to hang food there, really near the campsite. A couple of them are like that because honestly, they're just getting a lot of high use right now. So, and the kind of etiquette at this time on the trail is not to hang your food in camp anyway, because people don't want the bears coming into camp to try to get the food, even if it's hung well. So people actually prefer you to hang it outside of camp anyway. But yeah, Andy Creek it's a really small site. I don't know if to me, it's never felt swampy. As I mentioned before, that whole 20 miles basically north of 5 Mile Rock is beaver territory. I guess that's what I mean when I say beaver territory. It's basically the entire 20 miles is swampy. So that's, the campsite itself, to me, when I've camped there, has never been wet. Like it's not wet on the ground. But if it's bug season, the bugs are going to be super intense up there. Yeah.
That's the last one for right now, but some people are typing, so we'll wait a moment.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Do you use a Bear Canister?
I use a couple different, I use for through hiking. I'm still using like a waterproof think it's a Sea to Summit. It's actually like supposed to be a stuff sack for a sleeping bag, but I find it to be more rugged than I need for my sleeping bag. I just use a compression trash bag inside of my pack. I don't even use a rain cover anymore. And then I do use some smaller waterproof bags for like my clothing and stuff like that. Like anything that really needs to stay waterproof in my bag. But then that stuff sack, I converted over to basically my food bag because it's waterproof and it's rugged enough to hang from a tree. So I just do the old, like what people call, I guess, the Pct Hang, although I always think that's kind of fancy. I take I have a 50-foot paracord. I haven't ever found myself needing more than that. And I keep it in a little bag that's tough enough for me to basically find a little rock. And I found this to be the best technique because, like, using a stick, for example, that's the perfect way to get your rope stuck. You're using a stick to throw your rope. So just use a little rope bag, tuck a rock in there, tie my rope to it, and then I just sling that over a branch. The goal is to be, of course, 12 feet off the ground, 6 feet off the tree, and 4 feet below the branch. So as long as you can throw, about, I guess, 16 feet, you're good. And it's just a matter of finding a good sturdy branch that's at that height without a billion other branches around it, right? But you get really good at this. And I turned it into a little kind of game for me, like how I was out my goal. I got competitive with myself. I was like, one throw. We're doing it in one throw. So you get really accurate. And I have never had a bear get my food, ever, not a single time, or any critters either. So I'm pretty good at it. And the other technique I like to use, especially for short trips, like 2-3 day trips, I do use an earth sack, which is gorgeous because you just tie it to a tree and you're done. But they're heavy and they're Kevlar. So they're like really hard to get into your pack. But I've never used a Bear Canister on the SHT. It would be a totally legit, people love them, people bring them. It is bear country. I just want to address this right now because it drives me crazy. Every time people on the Facebook page bring this up, somebody tries to post Andrew Skirka's essay about this and claim that Skirka's giving us permission that we don't have to hang our food on the SHT. But if you actually read the article, all he's saying is if there aren't bears, there are other options. Okay. There are bears everywhere, everywhere on the SHT. And in fact, they had to close a site last year because a bear got aggressive at a site at Leskinen. So there are bears. They are trying to get your food, and you definitely need to have a bear food storage plan for your through hike.
Do you carry bear spray?
Nope. I personally don't feel a need for it because I've done 2,000 miles of long distance hiking trips. I've done probably, oh God, I don't even know many more miles of that of section hiking. I have lived in the woods continuously, once for 2.5 months and another time for 5 months. And I have never seen one. Actually kind of mad about it. Never seen one on a trail. I've seen one in a resort trying to steal another blueberry pie out of a window that it had found the day before. But I really think the big predators out of there, they really try to stay out of your way if they can. So as long as you don't sleep with your food as your pillow, you don't eat in your tent, I don't feel the need for bear spray personally, but I don't judge anyone who wants to bring it.
We're going to close on this question, which is, what was your toughest day on the Superior Hiking Trail?
Oh, it definitely, that first through hike, I made a weird decision. No, I made a decision. I'm not even going to judge it. I made a decision when I was coming out of Duluth that I didn't want to get off the trail for 14 days. So I had a resupply delivered to me at Reeves Road, and I didn't have any rest days planned in there really. And then I hadn't really completely tested my gear out before I left. And I was using a pretty old rain shell, and I discovered, like, I didn't even know that the rain shell waterproofing breaks down over time. And so it was just kind of a bitter, it was like a really cold day. It was 50 miles, it was the 50 degrees, 15-mile-an-hour winds, just that one of those days where the rain's going sideways in your face. It's just miserable. And then the other mistake I had made was I had only brought a down puffy warm layer with me because I was trying to be lighter. But then when the time came when it did actually get cold out there, because it had been super hot, I realized, and it was pouring rain, I realized I couldn't wear that without like risking it getting soaked and then compromise my ability to actually stay warm in my tent later when I stopped moving. So I just had like a thin uh wool shirt and my raincoat, which wasn't waterproof anymore. So those were, it was a good lesson for me because, and I was straight up miserable. I mean, I was shaking so hard that at one point I was like, it's August, but am I like getting hypothermia? I don't know what's happening here. I was so cold. And later I actually found out that there was a guy, he's another pretty famous YouTuber, Rory Anderson, I think his name is. He was trying for an FKT that day, and he'd only brought a wind layer, and he got off the trail that same day because he thought he was getting hypothermia. So that was the day I just had to stop and put my tent up after like 5 miles and just get in my sleeping bag and it took me like an hour to get warm again. It was pretty bad. So I made mistakes there that contributed to that misery. And I learned, and I
Thanks for sharing, Annie. Thank you so much for your presentation. This was awesome and super informative, and it sounds like we have a lot of people out there listening and learning a lot from you. So thank you for joining us at the Spring 2021 Expo.
Thanks for having me, and everybody who goes through hiking this year. I hope you guys have an amazing hike.
Everyone who's watching, feel free to check out our YouTube page at Midwest Mountaineering. I'll post the link in the chat, and that's a great place to see this presentation recorded and all the other ones that we've had this week, and there have been a lot of awesome ones if you just want to learn more about the outdoors in the Midwest or all over the world. And yeah, hope everyone has a great, beautiful evening. Thanks, Annie.
Cool. Thank you so much for all the help.
Of course. Have a good evening, Annie.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.